Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished members of the Tribunal. Exactly 1 year ago, on 14th November 2020, the Tribunal's establishment was declared with a call to the public to provide documents and evidence to the Tribunal. The response was overwhelming. In a matter of 48 hours, the WhatsApp number of the Tribunal received 275 calls, mostly from Iran, from families of the victims and those who have witnessed the atrocities. The Counsel team interviewed all those who had made the calls and eventually compiled 165 witness statements. The Counsel team selected 45 witnesses plus 10 reserves. I'm really sad and sorry that we could not call all of them, but we have called 33 witnesses this week. As promised, all the witness statements, together with all the documents that they have provided to us, will be on the record for the Tribunal's review. In addition, the Counsel team collected, collated, and categorized over 1,000 video clips of the scenes of violence that was recorded during 4 days that demonstrations and protests had continued. Some of these were presented to you in the evidence of Ms. Sadr on Friday. The Tribunal also received the evidence of expert witnesses on aspects of atrocities committed during these days by the security forces. We have now reached the end of this stage of proceedings. You have heard the evidence of victims, the grieving parents who lost their children, the light of their lives, the victims who were tortured, insulted, abused, and even raped by the cruel rulers of this regime. So let's sum up what has been submitted to the Tribunal. First and foremost, the Counsel has to accept and admit that the record before the Tribunal is far from complete. While the Counsel has been able to interview over 200 witnesses, mostly from Iran, this is not even the tip of the iceberg. Many victims and eyewitnesses have not been able to contact the Counsel or provide evidence to the Tribunal. Apart from few members of the security forces who have bravely risked everything to give evidence to this Tribunal, the Counsel has not been able to engage those in charge in Iran and compel them to give evidence. Most notably, none of the 133 individuals listed by Counsel as accused have not responded to Counsel and not submitted any evidence in their own defense. Nor have they appointed a counsel or representative to plead on their behalf. The government of Islamic Republic of Iran, notwithstanding numerous calls by the Counsel to cooperate with this Tribunal and submit evidence, has failed to do so or appear before this Tribunal. In fact, Bagheri Kani, Deputy Foreign Minister, who was in London on Thursday, 11th November, rather than attending at your hearings, have told his counterpart in the Foreign Office, according to a report by Voice of America, that unless the UK government stops this Tribunal, the Iranian government would refuse to negotiate with the UK and other governments in connection with nuclear deal. An interesting response had appeared from the government's officials in the course of today. Mr. Hassan Nourouzi, who is the vice chair of the Judicial Committee of the Parliament, so he must understand the judicial process, as in response to Aban Tribunal's invitation for him, had stated, and I must say that he had the chutzpah to say, "I am one of those who shot at the people. We killed them. Now, who's going to try us?" This is the reaction, Mr. Chairman, members of the tribunal, you get from a very high official in Iran this morning. In response to your tribunal, in response to the families who have lost their loved ones, he says, "Yes, I have shot them. Now what are you going to do about it?" And this is the level of impunity that this tribunal has been set up to fight and hopefully dismantle. Finally, Counsel team had not been able to visit the site of atrocities and report to the tribunal their findings. On the positive side, however, you have heard the heartful evidence of our fact witnesses. You heard how, in response to the legitimate and peaceful demands of the demonstrators protesting a sudden hike in the price of petrol, the security forces clamped down on the protesters by killing, maiming, and beating up all the demonstrators in the most cruel and horrible way. It may be, as Justice Jacob put to one of the witnesses, that at the heart of the protest was the complaint that the government is not good. Would that affect the legitimacy of the complaint? We submit not. Would it justify the cruel repression? Again, we submit not. Would any action by the demonstrators justify the torture, cruel and inhuman punishment that was meted out to those arrested, including the sexual abuse and even rape? Again, we submit not. The tribunal has rightly questioned the number of those killed, arrested, and tortured during the events. As stated in the Council's opening, the Council does not engage in the statistics or in the guessworks, as it can only be a guesswork in the absence of cooperation by the government of Iran of how many died, injured, and arrested. The amnesty report as submitted by the Council as evidence, backed by the powerful evidence of Ms. Raha Bahraini, tells you that Amnesty had been able to record and verify over 300 deaths up to date. It does not tell you the number of deaths. It simply tells you how many verifiable deaths have been recorded by Amnesty. Within the limits of its investigation, like other NGOs, Amnesty has limited resources, but a very robust method of verification. It's not surprising that other organizations, perhaps with less rigorous methods of verification, has reported 1,500 or even more deaths. Amnesty figures simply puts a floor on the numbers. The Council submits with certainty that the numbers are higher, and most probably substantially higher, that has been recorded as verifiable. The number of injured even calls for more of a guesswork and speculation. As you heard from the witnesses and the brave health workers, those injured did not refer to hospitals for fear of being arrested. Thus, even the government may not have a proper record. The same issue arises with the number of those arrested. It is the Council's case that the Tribunal has to look at the totality of these figures and their combined effect. The evidence that has been leaked out, in particular the video clips, are only a small sample of what in reality happened. The government closed down the internet to ensure that the evidence will be contained in the country and not leaked out. They confiscated all the footages of CCTVs, mobile phones, and cameras. Fatemeh Khoshru, whose evidence you heard yesterday, was charged with leaking these clips. You heard the price she paid for this. The tribunal also, and again rightly, questions whether incidents were widespread. Amnesty reports arrests, and I repeat, arrests only in 28 out of 31 provinces. They do not have records of arrests, or they had not received reports of the arrests in 3 provinces. It doesn't mean, and it does not establish, that demonstration and clampdowns did not occur in Qom, North Khorasan, and Chahar Mahal. It only suggests that, again, arrests were reported and recorded from 28 provinces out of 31. We also submitted the Justice for Iran report, which shows videos of demonstrations and clampdowns in 29 out of 31 provinces. Notably, it includes Qom, and Chahar Mahal. So that leaves between the 2 main reports 1 province, and that is North Khorasan, that we do not have reports of arrest, and we do not have video clips from. That makes it 30 out of 31 provinces. So the question that is before you, whether events happening in 30 out of 31 questions, with the evidence before you, is sufficient to consider these atrocities as widespread. On the issue of systematic, it is the Council's case that the repression has been systematic for the last 40 years. Whether you look back at the events of 1980s, also called the Bloody Decade, as chronicled by the Iran Tribunal, or student uprisings, which almost occurred every other year, the stolen elections in 2009, the workers' protests, which has been a continuing and seamless and systematic repression, Iran never had stopped systematically repressing its own people. It's a never-ending story. And finally, I deal with the Council's case for the 133 accused. At Annex 4.2 of the Justice for Iran report, which is at pages 119 to 128 of your bundle, and also appears here, the position, a bit further on, yes, the position of the rulers of the country had been set out, and in front of each one of them, the video clips that can lead to the holder of that office. For instance, for the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, at the top of the list, because of his position, because he is in command of everything, because nothing is done in that country without his say-so, the entire Annex 4.1, which is all the video clips that had been produced, is presented to you as evidence. The same appears for the 11 people you see on that page. They are all having a joint and several liability for the events that had occurred. All the video clips are relevant. Then when we go from number 12 onward, you will see the number of the video clips that relates to the position of the office holder that has been stated there. And you go down until you reach the 133 number. So for each one of them, there exists evidence of their crime, the fact that they either had been directly responsible for the event or they have ordered people under their control to carry out these evil acts. Also, I would like to show you another schedule with a list of the 133 people, but this time connected to our witnesses. So you will receive the actual schedules on your emails, and for each and every office holder that had been accused by the counsel, you will find the list of witnesses that have testified in connection with that position of the office. It is true that our witnesses have not named each one of these alleged perpetrators, but they are all from the cities and provinces where these alleged perpetrators were in command and control. They are the ones who ordered shoot to kill. They are the ones who had allowed these incidents happen. And for that reason, the council calls them as the accused, and of course, it is for this tribunal to consider why they have done these things, and if so, what are the consequences. I mean, you can look at some of the names with extensive number of witnesses testifying to that, and some with less. Not that it makes it less criminal, but it's because the reporting had been not possible or more difficult. Now you have to look back and ask, why are we doing this? None of you, distinguished members of the tribunal, or members of the council team and our support, have any direct connection with these events and the victims of these events. We have not lost our loved ones, although we mourn with the families who have. We have not been tortured, insulted, or abused. Why bother? This is not the only atrocity that happened or is happening around the world. This is not the only time the regime of Islamic Republic of Iran has murdered and suppressed its peaceful citizens. So why bother? Why now? I don't think I, or for that purpose, any of our team, can find the right answer to these questions. But perhaps Azadeh Purzand, who I assume is here, who lost her father to this cruel regime and saw her mother behind the bars, a close friend of mine, for daring to be a human rights lawyer and a female human rights lawyer in the Islamic Republic of Iran, can give you an answer. She was in this hall on 10th November. She wrote in her article called A Day at Aban Tribunal. And she says, After many years of struggling against myself, not to be a victim, for the fear of appearing weak and unreasonable, I felt free to be a victim. It was the first time that being a victim felt powerful, felt strong, felt capable of prevailing justice in its simplest, barest, and least abstract manner. I looked at the judges, that's you, ladies and gentlemen, and I felt safe. It's not only Azadeh that feels like that. You have brought the same feeling for many Iranians who have been eagerly following these proceedings over the last 5 days. And that is not limited to those who suffered the atrocities of Aban 2 years ago. This tribunal has been a wake-up call for the authorities who believed, and I'm sure some will continue to believe, that they can get away with all the misdeeds and crimes that they've committed over the last 4 decades against the Iranian nation, like the gentleman that I quoted earlier. They have no answer, and never had any answer, to the grief of parents of Farzad, Puya, and many others who fell victim to the guns of this regime. We are getting calls from all over Iran to allow more witnesses to come forward and tell you the stories that they have witnessed, the atrocities and humilities they have suffered. Like Azadeh, they feel that it is not a crime to be a victim. You have empowered them to break the seal of silence that they have locked themselves in for the last 2 years. For these reasons, and for the victims' right to the truth, distinguished members of the tribunal, the Council is asking you to keep the records of this tribunal open and allow further evidence to be submitted to the tribunal. Finally, I must thank our brave witnesses who risked everything to come here before you, and not only to this tribunal, but tell the world what has happened in Iran. It may sound like a soundbite, and perhaps it is, but there is no better way of saying it that you are the voice of voiceless. Witness 179 asked you to be the voice of Mohammad Hashamdar, the one who saved an employee of the bank while the fire was going on. And minutes later, he was shot dead by the police officers. His family lost their breadwinner. No one has mentioned his name, but you are the ones who can do that. I thank you very much for being patient and being with us all these 5 days, and I'm sure the tribunal will reach eventually the final conclusion. Thank you very much.